He's in a capital campaign. Hey, Jeff, how are you? Good, how are you? Good. Great.
Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order, please.
Regular meeting of Washington, Missouri City Council, February 20th, 2018, 7 p.m. Brinker.
Here.
Heidrich.
Here.
Holtzmeyer.
Here.
Woheski.
Here.
Patke.
Here.
Skornia. Solentrup.
Here.
Waterman.
Here.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will all the council members answer if they have or have not read the minutes of the council meeting dated February 5th, 2018? Patke?
Yes.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Waterman?
Yes.
Brinker?
Yes.
Solentrup?
Yes.
Woheski?
Aye.
Holtzmeyer.
Aye.
Having read the minutes, are there any comments or questions?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Brinker, seconded by Holtmeyer, to approve the minutes from our last meeting dated February 5th, 2017. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you approve the minutes. Thank you.
Approval and adjustment of agenda, including consent agenda. You have a pay request to Washington Engineering and Architecture for the Schultz Industrial Park stormwater improvements.
Okay, you have an item, and Sal, I believe that's yours.
Yes, this is for the Community Development Block Grant, as required by the state. Every payment we make to our contractor, the P&G Group, will have to be put on the consent agenda because they have to submit certified payments to meet, that say their payroll is meeting all the federal requirements since we're using federal money. So you'll see this on every consent agenda until the project is complete. So every time we pay the contractor. And the reason it's paid to Washington Engineering Architecture is because P&G Group is a sub of our contract with Washington Engineering. So
Does that project start on the 2nd of January?
it started, I think, the second week of January because they had some weather issues, but it's still scheduled to be completed by March 31st.
Make
Any
a motion.
questions or comments?
Make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Holtmeyer, seconded by Brinker, to approve the item on the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you approve the item. Thank you.
Priority items, mayor's presentations, appointments and reappointments, police department reappointment.
This evening, we have 3 reappointments to the police department. That would be Betsy Schultz, detective, who's here this evening, Dan Contarini, reserve officer, and R. Patrick Morin, patrol officer. And all 3 of those appointments are for 1 year, as usual. Chief?
Good evening, council. I got a voice back, so
Look out.
look out. I
You should
can yell.
applaud.
Detective Schultz, can you stand up to the podium, please? I highly recommend you reappoint her for another year. All the recent sex crimes you've seen in the newspapers, Betsy has been an integral part in the investigation, in collecting the evidence, and in interrogation and getting confessions out of these individuals and taking care of them. She's her own special victims crime unit herself there. So,
That's her.
but she does a fabulous job. She can make people say things that you wouldn't think they could tell. So, I would highly recommend you reappoint her. Reserve Officer Contarini, he is always there when we need him. He's done a lot of volunteer hours, but he also works part-time now and then since we have a little bit of manpower. And he is our chaplain for our department, and he comes out on his own to sudden death scenes, to accident scenes, and we've gotten a lot of input from the community of how much they appreciate him being there for them at such a crucial time. And Officer Pat Moran, he is a veteran. He is thorough in what he does, and we enjoy Pat. Although if you talk to him, his nickname is Eeyore, but I can assure you that he is a fine officer and does a great job. So I would recommend you reappoint all three, please.
Any comments or questions from the council?
Make a motion.
Second.
We have a motion by Sullentrup, seconded by Heidrich, to approve the reappointments of Detective Betsy Schultz, Reserve Officer Dan Contarini, and Patrol Officer R. Patrick Morin. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you approve the reappointments.
Chief, if you don't mind me asking, I know you lost your voice, but where did you find it?
The doctor found it for me. He had to reach down there pretty far, but he found it.
Well, good.
Very cool.
It's a miracle.
How's Mama liking that?
Sound good.
You
Well,
sound better than before.
I was still under the influence of anesthesia the night after this was done, so I didn't much know any difference, but she said there was quite a bit of difference.
Sounds good, Chief.
Congratulations.
You did.
Yeah, awesome.
Betsy, thank you for being here, and thanks for all you do. So, anyway,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Betsy was our Officer of the Year last year, right? You were Officer of the Year? Yes.
My youngest one wants to come up too. So you can come.
Come on up.
I just want to say thank you for reappointing me, and I really enjoy working for the city of Washington and putting all my effort and my passion into my job, and it's, you know, it helps my family, and it's, you know, my kids are supportive of me, and it's, being a police officer is a sacrifice because of the hours and the things that I do, so she's here with me, supporting me too, so thank you.
Very good.
Tax Increment Financing Commission reappointments.
Okay, we have two reappointments to the Tax Increment Financing Commission, the TIF Commission. We have no need to call that group to order at this time, but we felt that we would stay on top of the expired appointments. So anyway, we're going to request your approval to reappoint Mark Wessels and Bridget Kelch, and both of those terms would end in August of 2021. Any questions or comments?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Brinker, seconded by Holtmeyer, to reappoint Mark Wessels and Bridget Kelch to the Tax Increment Financing Commission. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you approve the reappointments. Thank you.
Urban Forestry Council reappointments.
We also have some reappointments this evening for the Urban Forestry Council. Again, these are for 3-year terms, and we'd like to ask your approval to reappoint Dave Waymeyer, Franz Meyer, excuse me, I think that should be Franz Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R, and William Davitt. And those would be for 3-year terms.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Hadke, seconded by Waterman, to approve the reappointments of Dave Waymeyer, Franz Meyer, and William Davitt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you approve the reappointments. Thank you.
Public hearings, special use permit, modify existing cell tower, 85 Cecilia Drive.
Sal?
All right, let's give you a little background on this request, this application that was submitted. The existing cell tower, it is a disguised cell tower that is disguised as a flagpole at 85 Cecilia Drive. This is behind the old, what's commonly called the Big D building, the old Jogi building. You can see there is a subdivision that is just north of the subject property in Highway 100. The tower was constructed in 2004, and under the regulations at the time, and they've since been adjusted, the state has changed the rules, and we have our own new set of development codes for cell towers. But if a tower were to be requested and put up and proposed as a disguised cell tower, they were not required to get a special use permit, which actually is still the case today, but under the previous code, that was also the case in an industrial district, and this property is zone industrial. So this cell tower was put up just with a building permit. They have now since come back this year and requested to place an additional antenna on this tower. Now, I think it's important for me to point out that we get these requests a couple times a year. We have cell towers throughout the city of Washington, and any time either a tenant of the tower or the owner of the tower comes in and wants to place additional antennas, as long as they're not increasing the height by more than 10%, which they commonly aren't, they're normally not on the top of the tower, all they have to do is get a building permit. It does not require another special use permit. In this case, the applicant let us know that the placement of these additional antennas will require them to take down the flag permanently. Now, since it was approved without a special use permit as a disguised tower, just the action of them taking down the flag requires them to get a special use permit. So the reason we're here tonight is strictly to grant or deny a special use permit for a undisguised cell tower. Mr. Piantek can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm under the impression we cannot, under state statute, request information on the RF study or co-location requirements of the actual antennas. It's just because if it needs to be disguised or not.
That's correct.
Right. So just to kind of point out how we got to this point. So kind of point out the subject property already. It is zoned M1, which is our light industrial. You can see that all the yellow around it is R1A, single-family residential. This is Burger Park here to the west. And then there is some two-family just to the south on Cecilia Drive as well before you get to Highway 100. They've submitted some simple plans just showing, this is required for the building department, but to show generally what the proposed antennas will look like. You can see they're not all the way at the top. The tower is 150 feet in height, and the proposed tower or the antennas will be placed at 125 feet. So they won't be to the top of the pole. But in their application, they've stated that the flag will interfere with the antennas, and that's the reason why it needs to be removed. Just to show, I wanted to show the closest residential property lines. That's property that's actually utilized as single-family residential. From the base of the pole, it's approximately 116 feet. That is just to the neighboring property line. That's not to the neighboring home. But we typically, if this were to come in as a brand-new tower, would look to the neighboring property. So there is a structure in the fall zone, but it's the structure on the subject property, and these are designed typically to, if they were to fail or to fall, to crumble or to break in half essentially, or thirds, and not fall the full height of the tower, 150 feet. And we do require them to show that the additional antennas would not be a danger to the tower itself. They would be able to hold that weight. So again, they're not requesting to increase the height or move the tower. They're just requesting to no longer have it be disguised. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
What kind of questions and answers were there at the planning and zoning?
Well, there was a lot of discussion about the radiation levels. If the antennas were going to be high enough that the readings wouldn't be detrimental to the neighboring properties. There was a lot of discussion on how that's actually monitored. If the FCC has their own federal requirements that they're supposed to be, I guess, every so often there has to be a reading to make sure that they're still falling under the federal requirements for the radiation levels. We don't require tower owners or the tenants to submit that information to the city. That is regulated by the federal government, and I don't think we're even permitted to request that information. But there was a lot of discussion for 45 minutes about the radiation levels before we kind of brought it back to that we are only there to discuss the flag. And then there was also questions if the flag could remain and the tower could be engineered so that it wouldn't interfere. I guess before they had additional tenants, the flag used to be on the interior of the pole. You would actually pull the flag down through the inside of the tower. But they said with the additional tenants that they've had to replace that with new wiring to go up, so there's no space for the flag. I'm sorry, I should have put that slide on there. I normally do. At the end of the P and Z discussion, there was a vote, and they voted in favor of it 5-4.
Can you go back to the diagram of there you go.
Yep.
So are they going to propose, Sal, so they're going to keep the antenna that exists within the pole still, that's in there?
Yes,
today,
I
is
believe
that
so.
correct?
Yeah, because and the applicant is here tonight, or someone is here tonight to speak on behalf of the applicant, but they have cylinder, I think that's what they call them, cylinder antennas today, where they're basically inside of the tower. It's a little bit wider up top, but they're inside the pole itself, and these will be outside.
How much taller is it going to be?
It's not going to be any taller. It's currently 150 feet, it will remain at 150 feet.
So if I'm to understand this correctly, all they're doing is putting those antenna at 125 feet on the exterior of the pole, whereas before all the antenna was on the interior of the pole.
Correct.
Okay. Just so
And I'm under the impression that I think it's Sprint is the applicant. I'm under the impression, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but they are going to keep their current antennas, and this is just for extra coverage.
So in 2004, was the flag offered by the cell tower constructor, or was that a compromise with the neighbors to do that?
I can address that because I was downstairs when it came through. That was, we basically told them they're aware of our code. I mean, and our code is modeled after a lot of other cities, St. Louis and areas. When that Telecommunications Act of 1996 went through, a lot of people passed the same ordinance, very similar. And so we told them, that if they wanted to put one there at that location, if they disguised it, they wouldn't have to go through the special use permit procedure. And by disguising it, you just have to go ahead and show that it's a big flagpole, basically. So that's what's been out there that entire time, since they put it up in 2006, you said?
2004.
Excuse me.
So
So they're not disguising it anymore?
Yeah, by basically putting the antenna on the outside, you're no longer, as Sal said at the beginning, it's no longer a disguised support structure, whereas before it was a disguised support structure because
Even
it was just
today-
a flag.
even today, in today's code, if an applicant were to come in and put up a new tower and they fall under the actual definition of a disguised tower, they do not have to go through a public hearing. All they need is a building permit. But once you,
It was always geared
regular cell tower.
to make the carriers go ahead and disguise it as much as possible, use other buildings that are at elevations that'll work for their, for whatever their coverage area is, et cetera. It was always geared towards making it so you just don't have constant towers all over your community with antennas sticking out.
Like the one that sits on Clay Street.
Correct. And we have a couple of those. There's no question about that. We have those. But if they wanted, at the time they were offered, they could either put it up as a regular tower and go through the special use permit process, or they could do the disguised support structure.
So what would have to happen if we wanted to keep it disguised?
I think we just have to deny the special use permit.
But
They could come back, I guess,
they
with a
could-
revised,
Yeah.
revised disguised proposal.
Right.
And our code has a definition on what a disguised tower is. I don't have it memorized, but I could
Yeah.
pull it up on the computer if you want me to.
Other time, I think when they first came out, there were some that were actually disguised as trees,
Yeah.
to try to fit in. There was one,
Somewhere
I
along
think,
the line, did we amend the ordinance?
And, well, we've amended it a
state of
couple times,
Missouri
but
did, basically,
Just
or-
in 2017, when we did our big overhaul of development code, we changed our telecommunications chapter as well, and that's primarily because of what was passed in August of 2014 by the state. That's when we took out all those co-location studies, the RF studies.
Yeah, when the state passed that legislation, basically what they did was, we used to have a situation like, there was the one that was put up behind Orchlands, for example. We made them go through, we could hire a third-party contractor to go ahead and do a study to say, is a cell tower appropriate for the coverage that they're trying to do? Is it appropriate to go ahead and locate it here? Why can't they locate it on Crestview? Or why can't they go up to 14th Street and go to the firehouse and use one of those, et cetera? And so you could require at that time for them to go ahead and put a study together. They had to pay for that independent study. and then give the results. One of the things that was taken away at the local control by the legislature back in 2014
Yeah.
was, that cities or municipalities couldn't request those studies. They just tried to make it, in essence, they made it easier for the cell towers to go ahead and be constructed without a lot more local control over it. I don't know if Mark, is that?
You're 100% accurate.
You can put it anywhere now.
Well,
pretty much. If you remember, we had a request a couple of years ago for a new cell tower out on West Main Street by, I used to call it the Sheltered Workshop. I'm not sure.
Impact.
Okay. There was a request at that time to put an antenna up there. They submitted their application just prior to the effective date of the new statute. My memory is they actually got approved, but they had to go through all those studies and why they couldn't locate it somewhere else and all that. What they could have done, had they wanted to, was simply wait for the effective date of that statute to go into effect, and we wouldn't have been able to do much of anything. So,
Well, I, for one, would hate to see the flag go. This is something you see when you come into Washington. That's just that's the downside of this for me. I do understand in the neighborhood, and I guess the real thing for me is we can have cell towers go up all over town and we don't have no control. It doesn't come to us. It's going to be a building permit and they can go up.
If it's disguised, here I'm pulling up
If it's disguised.
if it's discussed.
the definition in our current code for disguised support structure. Any freestanding man-made structure designed for the support of wireless facilities, the presence of which is camouflaged or concealed as an architectural or natural feature, such as may include but are not limited to clock towers, observation towers, pylon sign structures, water towers, artificial trees, flagpoles, and light standards. And it said it's not limited to, so that's the part that, if they come in with some other idea for disguised,
if somebody wanted to come in and put up a tower like is out on Clay Street, that's a different story. That would require coming through here.
Because of height?
It's not a disguised.
It's not disguised. They're just putting it up as a
It's just a
cell
wireless
tower.
So is Sherry from SSC Tower Engineers here?
no.
No?
No,
Or
there's
some-
someone here on behalf of the applicant, but I don't,
Oh, okay.
so. Here, I'll let. Unless you have more questions of me.
Hi, I'm here on behalf of the applicant. My name is Ashley Wessel. And I can take questions now, or if you'd like, I can give you a little bit more background.
Well, I talked to Sherry. Do you know Sherry from the engineering company that SBA is using? Or-
Yes.
Okay. And she was going to get some questions that I had over the phone answered.
That was actually me.
Oh, that was you. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. I thought I was talking to Sherry. That wrote down the wrong thing in my notes.
That's all right.
So do you have the measurements that we talked about?
So I don't have a specific diameter for the pole, but what the information that I do have is, as we said, that we're putting the antennas on the outside of the tower. The antennas will be about 2 feet to the exterior surface of the antennas from the pole. So which we call that a flush mount. The antennas will be mounted basically as flush as we can get them onto the tower. Sometimes when you see towers, you see kind of like a big arm. It sometimes looks like a triangle that's got a bunch of antennas on it. And that's not what we're proposing here. We're proposing to mount them flush against the pole and paint them the same color as the pole to try to mitigate any changes in the aesthetics. And I do have here, thank you. This is a photo simulation of what it will look like, what the proposed design will look like.
And one of the things that you and I talked about on the phone too was what other options there could potentially be for concealment. Did you have time to look into any other options for concealment?
There may be some other options for concealment, but the issue is these antennas have to go on the exterior of the pole, and so having that equipment on the outside, whether or not you try to screen them in some way or something like that, is still going to cause issues with the rope hitting against the equipment. It could sever the rope, could knock equipment down and cause safety concerns.
Oh, I'm sorry, maybe we had some miscommunication. I was talking about aside from it being a flagpole. Like, I've seen some options where, you know, we talked a little bit about it. There's so many different options of different things that could be used to conceal, to keep it a concealed tower that wouldn't necessarily be a flagpole.
Then you would be talking about changing the structure. I mean, that would be a very expensive endeavor. You'd have to potentially put up a whole new structure.
You couldn't just add a sign to it, because I've seen some that were, you know, signs that say like "Welcome to Washington" or a big giant corncob pipe, or.
It's still it's still very cost prohibitive because there are structural issues with adding something like that to the tower. It increases the wind loading, it increases the weight on the tower, and it just becomes very, very expensive to do something like that. And they also already have antennas at the top of the tower, so with canisters underneath and then these antennas, so you just run into lots of issues there with trying to come up with a completely new design for the existing site.
Could you continue the canister design down and keep the flagpole aesthetics?
They can't. We also run into more structural issues with that, just the way that it's built right now. They actually have some canisters already on there, but that are empty. But the issue that we have here is this upgrade is requiring larger antennas to go onto the pole, and they don't fit inside of those canisters that are there. So Sprint has, for example, 3 existing antennas at the very top of the pole, and those are already inside of those canisters. But these antennas are going to be larger. These are required for the upgrade so that they can address their capacity issues that they've identified in the area. And these are the antennas that they need to use to address those issues, and they're just too large to fit into those existing canisters, which is why they're going below the canisters. They can't be on the canisters either. They have to go below the canisters and be attached to the pole itself.
So how far, looking at this, is 150 foot tall, correct?
Yes.
The canisters, how far do they go down from 150 foot? What's the length of those?
I believe it's 30 foot.
Yeah, I think it's about 30 feet. I
30
believe
feet.
they're.
And then you got a space, it looks like here, and then you have the antennas below that?
Right.
So what is the length, do you think, off the top of your head, from the top of the pole down below these other antennas that are going to be below the canister?
From the top of the pole to the bottom of the antennas?
From the top of the pole, so aren't these antennas in this area here?
Correct.
What would be that length from the top of the pole down below there, do you think?
It's about 30 foot.
About 30 foot?
Yeah, and my name is Craig Licklider. I work for Sprint, so I'm a senior engineer. So I came here tonight to try to answer any questions that you've got.
So we'd still have 115 to 20 foot to put a flag. Would there be any possibility to put a flag below that?
Regulations about the flag size, and it'd be essentially half staff. And I know that, you know, you can only do that once, you know, issued to the location, you know, to a flagpole. I don't think we can have a flag always at half staff. I mean, if we could, you know, that's an option. I just don't know if it'd be in half staff the whole time. We'd never be able to raise it above those antennas. And I don't think US code would allow us to have it flat, a half staff all the time.
And there's already antennas at the top of that structure?
Inside the canisters, yes, sir.
So there's no way of putting a structure on top of that, mounting it as far as a flag on top of it
So
then?
the way it works is you've got almost like a monopole all the way up to the top where the canisters are.
Mhm.
And then from there, there's splines.
Mhm.
It's not a full outside monopole or
Mhm.
cylinder.
Mhm.
It has a pole in the inside, and it has all the mounting brackets to put all the canisters on.
Mhm.
So there's no way for us to be able to mount it inside the canisters up there and be able to put the canisters on. It essentially, the antennas would be outside the canisters. There'd be no way to wrap those antennas and make it look, you know, symmetrical all the way up, any more than it already has.
I was meaning at the very top.
You mean make it taller?
Yeah. Making like a template at the top, you know, and then just mounting it, you know, straight on, and then it would be another, you know, 40 foot above it or what have you, or 20 foot, or would that interfere?
Have to look at the structural, I'm not sure if you guys have looked into it, but you have to look at the structural of the actual pole, if it can handle that additional equipment up there.
That's
The
what I
reason-
mean.
Yeah, the reason why we went below is because structurally that pole, that monopole, is strong, that's the strongest point of that monopole before you get to the canister, because it's actual rigid. And we would band the antennas on that monopole, and then there would be no worry of wind loading or structural loading at that point. But if you try to raise, you know, increase the height of the tower or increase the canisters, then you have to go do a whole nother structural analysis. And did you guys look into that for replacing the canister?
No, they did not.
Okay.
I
That's
think-
usually,
Not for putting one on the very top.
I think what kind of is disconcerting to me is that it doesn't seem like there's been a lot, at least from what we're hearing, it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of thinking outside the box on the engineering side to try to maintain a concealed tower, even if it's not a flagpole. Because I mean, in my limited research that I've been able to have time to do, I've found all kinds of different options all over the country that I know would be possible, would just be, you know, painting or creating, I mean, for instance, in Independence, Missouri, I think they have almost the same kind of tower, but they have it painted as a giant pencil and it's near a school. So it's kind of like, you know, it wouldn't be cost prohibitive. It's just kind of thinking outside the box of trying to find out some way to make it more friendly to the people that live there, that in 2004, you know, everybody thought, okay, it's a concealed tower. Now it's going to be a giant white pole in our backyard. So I would like to have heard some more thought and different options that you've investigated to try to maintain that, rather than just throwing your arms up in the air and saying, we can't do it, it's not possible, we need to take it off to do this.
Well, like I said before, I think the biggest issue is just a lot of those options will require structural work, and that just gets very expensive. And so this was, you know, an option that they've used in other situations as well. This isn't the first time that they've, you know, done the exterior mount below because they've had antennas that are too large. We're running into that issue with upgrades in equipment at other sites as well. And so this has been something that, you know, has been pursued in other jurisdictions as an option, as a viable option. So,
Well, I understand it's absolutely less expensive because you don't have to do any additional work. But I know in Missouri, there are 3 other locations that have similar structures to what you're proposing. In Kansas City, they have one that's 150 feet, Lake St. Louis, 149, and in St. Peter's, 145, and they're all the stealth type monopole structures. And one of those, actually 2 of those, are still concealed as flagpoles, and this is with SBA, which I realize neither one of you are with, but they also own these towers, and somehow they've managed to, I don't think it's the same engineering, I don't think it's your engineering firm.
it's what it is essentially, it depends on how much equipment is in the tower. If we can run the rope essentially up through the middle of the tower, then we would be able to maintain it. The problem is if we have so much equipment inside the tower, it's gonna be very difficult. Like I said, the splines, it's almost kind of like a lazy Susan. It, you know, it has holes cut out, but it still has to have the rigidity. So you don't have a whole canister goes all the way up that's empty. You have a whole monopole till it gets to the canisters, and then you essentially have it's almost like a wheel spoke, like a wheel on a car. You know, you've got holes that you can go through, but you still have to have the structural rigidity. So essentially what happens is you can only put so many coax lines and different equipment up through those splines in order to get up to the actual antennas. So that's where it runs into issues, is if you just run out of room inside the pole, you're very limited. you wouldn't think a pole that size would be limited, and you are at the base, but when you go up through the top, you're very limited of what you can go through, what you can put through there, and that's essentially the last upgrade with the equipment that went through there, the coax, everything that went through the middle of the monopole, or, you know, the flagpole, essentially caused it where we could no longer run the rope without having an issue if it got snagged, if it got cut, you know, if there's any issues like that, that we would lose the flag. The flag would come off, and then that would create all sorts of problems. So it's really loading on the tower, but it's also loading inside the tower is where you run into issues. And like I said, it's not normally at the base. It's normally at the top where you run into those problems.
What is your overall, what is the detriment here? If we say, sorry, you have to keep the flag, you gonna take your pole and go somewhere else, or?
Well, we always try to use existing poles. I mean, it just makes the most sense for us. It makes the most, you know, for the cities. I mean, it's the least intrusive, the least problematic. It's just so much easier to use an existing pole. So right now we have 800 and 1900 frequencies on the pole. Because of the high demand on high-speed data, we need to go 2.5. And that's just another frequency block that Sprint had purchased through the FCC to be able to head and have additional frequencies to provide high-speed data. More than, you know, what you know, a meg, we can provide up to 50 meg. It just depends on where the area. So if, I've been racking my brain about this all week long, trying to figure out a way around it. The problem is that in order to put the antennas up there, we can't have the rope exterior. Because, like I said, if the rope gets hit in the wind, it's going to damage the equipment, or if it gets cut, then we're going to have a flag that's loose. And there's really no way else around it at this point to have both. So essentially, right now, we don't have high-speed data in this around this cell site. Now, we have a site that's west of town that we do have it on, and it's very on the east side where this flagpole is at. The coverage is very spotty. And I mean, and I live in St. Clair, so I'm always in Washington, so I'm always, you know, I'm familiar with this area. And if we don't get the enhancements, essentially we won't be able to provide high-speed data. And essentially that's where our customers are wanting. So it's a pinch for Sprint because we're trying to provide the high-speed data for our customers, which they're demanding, but we're also trying to do it in a way that really is the easiest for everybody. And essentially, the flagpoles, you know, back 10 years ago, everybody thought, hey, this is great. We can use flagpoles everywhere. And we could back when we had mostly voice customers. You know, they had a little bit of data, but it wasn't high-speed data. Now with it shifting from voice, making regular voice calls to having high-speed data, everything's changing. You know, we want, you know, 3G, then 4G, and 5G. I mean, it just, the technology keeps changing, and the demand on wireless keeps growing, that we've got to be able to provide, you know, what the customer desires. And we've got, I think, we just did this to, I think, 15 different flagpoles in St. Louis area within the past 9 months. Essentially put it on the outside, and it was really the only way, other option would be to vacate it and go try to build another tower. And that's not conducive really for anybody, for us, for you. You know, I understand that. I don't want a lot more towers either, but we have to be able to provide the coverage and the capacity that our customers need.
Well, and your customers are our residents.
Correct.
And they're the ones that are using it. So essentially, that's where it comes from. I mean, I know we'd like to keep the flag for sure, but I think the citizens of Washington are requiring this by using it, is essentially what you're saying. So that's where it goes.
Would you be able to make your cables inside the tower smaller?
We have tried. And essentially, so the way coax works is it's kind of like your house, right? You know, you have RG6, which runs through your house for, you know, for cable, or if you have a modem, cable modem. The smaller diameter of the coax, the more loss it has. So when we first started putting up towers, we used 1 5/8. So it was monstrous cable that we'd have to have one per antenna port. So we would have, at the bare minimum, we would have 12 of those lines going up to the antenna. When we went to 1 1/4, we keep going down. Now we're at 7/8. We keep reducing the diameter, try to get more equipment up the pole, but we've come to a point where diminishing returns that if we, especially at 2.5, and I'm trying not to bore you with a bunch of lingo, but essentially the higher the frequency, the greater the loss. If you know, AM, radio. You used to be able to, turn your radio to AM station and you carry it through a mountain. Because the wavelength is so slow that it actually will propagate through even the earth and even through trees. But the higher the frequency, the faster the wavelength, the more loss it has. So essentially at the 2.5 frequency, trying to keep it as simple as possible, the higher the frequency, the more loss that you get. So if we're already as low as, or the smallest diameter we can in the coax before we won't get enough signal up to the antennas for them to be able to radiate properly to provide the coverage that it needs.
Are you the single user on this tower?
Yes, right now.
And will there be others later?
Most likely, that's, other carriers are free to apply to go onto the tower as they determine that this is a location that would benefit their coverage. So there's a good chance, I don't know for sure, that would be up to Verizon and some of the other
You're gonna
carriers.
offer it, I guess.
Pardon?
You will be offering it to other companies?
Yeah, it's available. Mhm.
We always try to co-locate. Just makes the most sense, where we can.
What's the maximum antennas exterior that pole can handle?
I don't know what you guys were the structural was at.
I'm not sure. It can handle more. Was it 90%? Or no, don't quote me on that. I don't have that number.
So
I have the
essentially
previous
what we
one.
do is we run a structural based on what we require. And then it'll come back at either 80, 90, 100. If it comes over like 95%, then we have to do like a structural mod. We may have to go in and weld some extra brackets at the base of the tower within the compound. And there's engineering firms that do all that work. But to say how many antennas you can put on there, it'd be a structural analysis. And we only did the structural analysis based on the equipment we're trying to put on the tower.
Absolutely, but you just said it's actively being marketed, so like any property manager would be intelligent to go, oh, we've got 3 spaces, or no, we're full. We can't actively market it anymore.
Yeah. Depends on the carrier. Depends on
that's true.
the equipment that they need to put up on the tower.
Yeah.
But almost every tower in this area, unless it's completely full, is looked at. So I mean, all the carriers are trying to co-locate on a tower as opposed to build a new one, because once again, it's never conducive and it's never easy, as you guys already know, to try to build a new tower, even if it is a disguised tower or anything else. Does that
I
answer
know
your
you're
question?
an engineer and you're familiar with your job. I'm familiar with my job, but I'm just throwing this out there. Have you thought about putting electrical conduit on the outside of the,
We have ran outside the poles.
get the cables from the inside to the outside?
We have done that, and normally when we broach that subject, normally we're shut down because once again, you've got an attachment on the outside of the pole that's running up the side of the pole. And then once you go on the outside, it's a different type of structural. So in other words, they have to rerun the structural based on the conduit on the outside of the pole. So I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying normally when we broach that subject, it's usually shut down because they don't want to see more things running up the side of the pole.
But couldn't that be an easy way to just put the conduit right there alongside the new antenna, so that you could run the flagpole rope through that, and it wouldn't be at risk of damaging the antenna, it wouldn't be at risk of severing the rope for the flag. That seems like it would be a really easy engineering move to make everybody happy.
And I've looked into that, but the problem is that once you get the flag up, you can't get it back down. Because essentially you've got to have the bottom of the flag connected to the pole. Usually they have a weight ring that goes around there. So essentially, if we would run that rope, it would stop at those antennas. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
But the problem is that you've got to be able to get the flag up and down. And with that type of design, you can have it up there, but if you ever have to take it down, it's not going to come down.
And one last question, I think probably from me, but are there any other options for concealment that were even investigated, or did you just say anything else we know Blake is going to be too expensive, we're not even going to look into it?
No, we looked, when we designed these sites, we look at every option.
I mean, this time, not in 2004, but this
Oh, yeah. In other words, because we went through an upgrade plan, essentially. So we're trying to upgrade all of our sites in Missouri. And we look at each individual. We have a whole site development team that goes and looks at the individual sites and say, okay, let's try to figure out the best solution for this particular site. And for this particular site, unfortunately, this is really the best solution. We can't get the antennas inside, we got to put them outside, and there's no clean way of being able to run the flag up or down at that point, where we just limit ourselves.
But
And
what
we've-
other options for concealment did you look at besides the flag?
Essentially, with an existing pole, like she was saying, existing pole, you're limited on what you can do with an existing pole. We can paint the pole, that's an option, but essentially, there's not much structural change you can do to this pole to make it something that it's not. You would have to tear down the whole pole and essentially re-erect a whole nother pole, and you're looking at hundreds of thousands, close to maybe $500,000 by the time you do all that work. And once again, then whatever you put up, you still have to be able to have it structural to be able to handle the equipment we're trying to put up there.
Did John have?
So if you don't get your special use permit, you're still gonna be able to use the tower. You just won't be able to put your extra antennas on it for selling.
We'll be able to use our existing coverage, our existing frequencies we have today, but that will limit us from doing anything, any type of upgrades, improvements at all. And then and I'm not threatening, I'm just kind of laying it out to you guys. If we can't do that to this pole, we're gonna be forced to have to go look for another pole. And I don't want to say, we'll be back in here next month trying to build a pole, but that's the only other option we have at this point. If we can't use this existing pole, then we're gonna be forced to have to go try to find another pole. We've already signed contracts with SBC for leasing the equipment, leasing the ground, leasing the pole. There's a lot of investment that's already been put into it, but that's essentially, you're right, if you say, nope, we're not gonna do it, then we have to provide the coverage to our customers. We're gonna be forced to, I hate to say, but we're gonna be forced to go try to look for another location, which, like I said, won't be beneficial really for any of us.
But if you're gonna have to build a new pole and potentially spend that money to build a new pole, couldn't it make sense to at least investigate disguising that one and sharing the cost with SBA? It seems like.
No, and that's already been thought through, it's already been covered, it's already been looked at. The problem is that so in other words, Sprint is leasing the area from SBA. So in other words, it's SBA's pole.
Right.
So I can't tell you what SBA will do or, and vice versa. I'm just saying it's not conducive for us to have to do another pole, whether it's at this location or any other location. We don't want to do that because
Right.
it's not helpful, it's not beneficial for anybody, because essentially if we have to do that, then SBA is going to have a pole that they don't have any carriers on. So it's not, it's not beneficial for them, it's not beneficial for us to go out and do that. I'm just saying, I'm not telling you that we're going to do that. I'm just saying, if you say, no, we're not going to allow you to do it, that's the only other option. You ask what options are there. If we say no, that's really the only other option we have. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to be angry, I'm not trying to be hateful, I'm just letting you know, I'm just going to be honest with you. That's kind of where we're at this point.
Going back to that outside, the conduit on the outside of that pole. Now, in my field, I'd see a bunch of different things, and I'll guarantee you they have some kind of power tracking that you could run up there, and that conduit will have a slit in it, and that would be a power tracking, and you could run that flag down.
You're right.
Electrical, you could run it up, there'd be no ropes dangling, banging, anything.
You're right,
It's
if we
out
didn't
there.
do a clamp. The only option we have at going at that height is to do a clamp mount. And essentially, we would completely wrap the pole, so we would have to try to run that outside of the clamp. And I'm saying somehow you've got to be able to weigh the bottom of the flag down. You see what I'm saying? In other words, you can't just have one connection on the flag, because essentially the flag will just whip.
It'll be a power tracking.
It's like a garage door opener track.
Exactly. Same scenario.
I've
I've seen it out in the field. I've seen where they don't have any ropes involved. It's all electric. Up, it would come down. It's all in one tracking. You wouldn't have to worry about running a clamp all the way around. It would have strapping. It would have mounts that you could mount this tracking all the way up.
And that's something we can, to look
down.
into for sure. I mean, it's an option. It's
That'd be a
just-
lot less than $500,000, I guarantee you that.
Oh, well, it better, for sure. If not, they're making a killing.
Right.
But that's, but once
And
again.
I think that's what council, Waterman's talking about. I mean, we're coming up with a few ideas here, and we're just kind of hoping that you guys come up with some ideas, because our constituents want to keep this flag.
I
We
understand.
like this flag, you
I
know,
understand.
and we want to work with you.
Yeah.
But we gotta, like, I'll say Susan's, we gotta look outside the box here.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And it's difficult, going to different cities' zoning meetings. It's difficult because you never know what you guys would think. You know what I'm saying? In other words, and it's something that won't work in one may work in another. So we try to hit every angle as we can, because each city zoning for each different municipality, especially in St. Louis, is extremely difficult. And we can look into that. I don't know if that's feasible or not.
And again, we're not trying to be difficult either. you
I know
we're
you're,
just-
no. Every
we-
question's been
you know.
very good. It's just, I'm just saying, I don't know if that's feasible to have that tracking to go up and down, and what happens if it fails. I'm just trying to look at it long range to make sure we don't have another problem. We have to come back to you guys and say, we ran into this issue. I'm just trying to figure out a way to not have to do that. But I like the flag too. I mean, I'm 100% for the American flag. It's just trying to do it right is the key.
So could you look at some other options?
I had thought of the track option, but like I said, I've racked my brain this whole week to try to come up with other options especially with the weighted rings. I mean, that's something that, we'd have to go back to SBA and find out if it's a viable option or not. I mean, I hate to drag it out, but, and it's their tower. So I can't speak, I'm here for Sprint just to try to help answer questions, but that's really an SBA question of whether or not it can be done, whether or not if they've done it before, or, what the.
Well, ma'am, you're with SBA, correct?
No, I'm not with SBA.
somebody here is.
You're here on
Well,
behalf of SBA.
You're the representing engineer, though, right?
No, I'm not an engineer. I'm with site acquisitions. We typically handle real estate matters like zoning, hearings, and that sort of thing. So I'm here on behalf of them to kind of just advocate for the application,
Okay,
but I'm
so-
not an engineer.
Is this something that you can take back to them and address then, or?
I can ask them about it. Would the tracking be on the inside of the pole?
Have to
It'd
be on the outside.
No,
Okay,
it'll
that's
be
what I
on
was
the
going to
outside.
say.
Have to be on the
Okay.
outside.
It'll be on the outside.
Okay.
So when-
Make them exterior.
When I spoke to Roland Hooker, who is with SBA, and he is the regional, what is this title? Regional
I'm not
coordinator?
positive.
Okay, but anyway, he's in charge of managing the poles that they own in this region. He said that you were with SSC Tower Engineers, is that correct?
it's just Selective Site Consultants.
Okay.
Is the name of
So
the company.
you're not because he said that you were an engineering firm, because he kind of deferred.
Our firm does do engineering as well.
Because he just kind of deferred. He said, I don't really know what's going on with it. They're handling all that. And so that's why he couldn't answer any of my questions, and he referred me to you.
So in other words, they own the tower, and they contract the services to her to
Right.
try to work with Sprint and you guys to try to come to a resolution. But I mean, she can't tell you, yes, it will work, yes, it
Right.
won't. She'll have to go back and say, hey, this is what the city proposed. We need to look into it and come back with, is it a viable option or not?
So I guess the question is, which engineering, who's doing the engineering side? Is that Sprint or is it SSC?
SSC is doing the engineering work on behalf of SBA, but SBA has the final say.
Right.
Can we get somebody from SBA here so we can?
Yeah, essentially,
Actually,
we're here for them because essentially Sprint is the one that wants the tower. So, I mean,
Right.
but I'm not actually doing the engineering work of the tower. I take care of
Okay.
this needs a location here, and I take care of the phones to make sure that the phones work. So engineering, but a different facet of it.
Okay.
But it would be up to SBA because we can propose it, but it's not our tower, it's SBA's tower.
So really, the people that we need to talk to about engineering ideas is SSC, who would then take it back to SBA, correct?
Right,
So
I can take
So we need
ideas.
you to take it back to your company.
Yes.
So I think if you could just come back with some different ideas that you've tried, that they've looked into and proposed, that would be helpful, I think.
Because Sprint wouldn't be paying for this tracking system, would it?
I'm sure there'll be a cost assessment done.
I'm
and-
sure, but I mean, it falls back on.
I would just add one thing, Mark. That's called a raceway. It's an electrical cable raceway is the correct term.
Okay.
And you see them all over on, if you actually go to any pole that goes underground for like a Cat 6 cable for charter, you'll see them, they're black little, they're just black little conduits that screw right onto wooden poles. So they're just called cable
You
raceways.
just have to be able to have a way of being able to pull that up and down. And once again, you have to make sure that the bottom of the flag will fit
Well-
inside that as it goes down the.
And potentially, though, you could run your wires, though, for your antennas in that raceway and leave the cable for the flag in the actual pole itself.
I mean, it is an option. Normally, like I said, normally when I go to city zoning hearings, they don't want anything on the outside of the pole. I mean, they flat out, we don't want it on the outside of the pole. So this is a relief that you guys are okay with having something on the outside of the pole running up the flagpole, because normally, that's not the case. We may regret that later.
have-
We may regret that later.
Yeah, but,
I mean,
but
yeah,
right
but-
now, our
but
main
I-
thing
I
is
think-
the flag.
Well, that's right, but we're discussing all the ideas that someone else should come up with. All we need to do tonight is say, we want the flag or we don't want the flag, or we want the special use permit, and it's their job to come back and say, they said no, we have to keep the flag, so now we have to figure out a different reason.
Yep.
New pole or new way to keep the flag. So, I mean, I think,
Would you be okay with us tabling this for you people tonight, come back with another night for?
I mean, they always want an answer, but I mean, I'll come back. I don't have a problem. I just don't know how long it will take to, if it's been done on a tower, it's easy to do. If it's never been done on a flagpole for a flag, then it's gonna have to go out and get some work done to it.
When's your drop dead date for the 2.5?
Sooner the better. I mean, we're already about a year and a half out. So I mean, we're hurting as it is right now.
Well, maybe we should just either vote it up or down.
I mean, I don't mind you guys
And then-
tabling it and give us
I
time.
mean, then you would know for sure how we felt about it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, either way,
Let's give them time to come up with a viable option to keep it as a disguised pole.
so just to make sure I understand, when you say a disguised pole, you're solely speaking about the flag.
Correct. I
Okay,
think that's
'cause-
what they want.
Well,
They-
what about
Well,
those
I-
extra
Well, if you can-
antennas? What
I
about
don't
you?
think so. I think that, disguised pole doesn't mean just flagpole. I mean, and because we understand that if that is absolutely, you look into all this and that's not an option, I think, we haven't heard from the public, and this is a public hearing, so we have to hear from people, right? I don't know if everybody feels like it has to be a flagpole, or if people would be okay with another disguise. I don't know that we want to make that.
No, I'm just trying to understand so that when I go back and say, here's their requirements for a disguised pole, because when I look at a solid white pole that doesn't have, as she's saying, doesn't have the arms, like there's a lattice tower out on the west side of Washington that's by I think it's by the city park out there. That's not a disguised pole. I mean, it's a lattice pole. It, trims up as it goes up. That's not a disguised pole. In other words, but I'm just trying to understand where your guys' definition of disguised pole is. And if it's the flag that makes it yes or no a disguise, and that's information that I need to know. If it's not that, I'm just trying to make sure I understand where you guys are at as well.
I'm willing to bet that probably everybody in this room has a different idea of what disguised means.
But once you add the antennas that are the external antennas, it's no longer going to look like a disguised flagpole. I mean.
It'll be disguised as an
that's-
antenna.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a pole, but it's going to have antennas on it.
It's gonna
See, that's what I meant.
And that's why
Yeah.
I was just asking the question, just so I can try to understand. That's all.
Is this actually a
Public hearing.
public
It
hearing?
is a public hearing, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think we're good now. I think we have people here who would like to address the council.
Sure.
And then if we have any additional questions of you or comments, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Robert Ulrich. I live on Brookview Drive, and it has to be a flagpole. So I wanted to pass out some pictures that I had taken in Eureka. They have cell tower, much like ours in the past, and I've gone by today, and I've actually gone by it many times in the past. Yeah, hand them out for me, please. And they have been able to put the flagpole on top of their antenna. So perhaps Sprint needs to call AT&T and find out how they're doing it, because they've done it. Let me just a little stack there. So I would appreciate y'all looking at that flag, because that to me means a lot. It's almost the pinnacle of Washington, the way it waves out there. The people coming into town westbound see that flag. You know, they're in Washington. So I don't care if it's 3 antennas outside or 33. I just want the flag up there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't own that company.
Did you see this one?
You say what you like.
Okay, someone else. Hi.
Yeah, hi. I'm Sean Kestring, and I live pretty much across the street from Robert. Last night, we spoke, and he mentioned the Eureka, the flag on the top. So today, I called Eureka. I spoke to the Eureka Building Commissioner John Boggs, and he said that, and I have this for you to look at with notes of my phone conversation. This is a Google Earth map that shows where this cell tower is. It's at 22 Hilltop Village Center Drive. It's just west of the McDonald's in Eureka. And there's a permanently attached flag at the top of the cell tower. And he estimated the cell tower to be about 100 feet, so it's not the 156 feet that we have. He said that the flag always remains at the same level because there's no rope. It's just permanently attached at the top. AT&T is responsible for all flag maintenance as well as the cost of replacement flags. AT&T uses bucket trucks to attach the flag, and he would not share his AT&T contact information with me. He said he could not. And then I just mentioned to him the possibility of maybe making this flag a little smaller, whatever. And he pointed out that all flag sizes must be in relation to their height as determined by the U.S. Flag Code. So anyway, this is the Google Earth map where you can see it. And then at the back, I've attached the City of Eureka, his phone number, and, showing that he is the building commissioner, John Boggs, and his email address.
I appreciate all this information you just gave us.
Yeah.
Was that given to the planning and zoning also?
I'm sorry?
All this information that you give us, the pictures and articles, were they put out at the planning and zoning meeting too?
No. No.
Have you gotten all this information in the last week?
Yes. Yes. And what happened, just to clarify it, at the planning and zoning meeting, we spent so much time talking about the radiation levels and RF and so on because at the beginning of the meeting, no one stated that Missouri statutes prohibited, Sprint to require us to require that information of Sprint. So we were, my husband's a mechanical engineer. All of us were very concerned about the health issues. Then it was probably 10 to 8. We had spent almost an hour discussing all that only to find out, oh, gee, the only issue is whether the flag can be permanently removed or not. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Margaret Jett. And what I was wondering was, you're saying, if I can clarify wherever they went, there you are. You're saying that from the pole, this will stick out only 2 feet?
Yeah, from the exterior of the pole to the exterior of the antennas. I mean,
All the way around. So, yeah, okay. So because I was looking at different issues, through the FCC and things, and they were saying that if it was too large, that you could definitely say, no, that you don't have to, you can't do this. But the flag is incredibly important to me, and it's important to everyone throughout the subdivision, and I think everyone's pretty much in agreement with that. And, I came from, I'd spent a couple of years over in a communist country doing mission work. And the first thing that I came back to and saw was when I saw the flag. It was an amazing thing for me. It's very personal. So to share that with you, you know, it is very, very important for me personally, as well as the others throughout the subdivision. I mean, there's many that can't be here tonight, and they've also, you know, stated the same things, saying, yes, we want the flag at whatever cost. So the ideas that you've had, Mark, were wonderful. The idea, Susan, that you have actually thought beyond just saying, oh, well, it doesn't cost, it costs too much. To me, that's not acceptable either. To, you know, it's dig a little farther, you know, do your homework a little more. And I really, truly appreciate that, you know, and, you know, the work that you guys have been doing tonight, the questions have been very substantial and relevant and informative. So I do appreciate you all very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, most of you know me. I'm Bob Zurich, the commander at the VFW. Also, I'm with the American Legion, and our commander for the American Legion is here. And thank you for you know, having this discussion tonight. Now, as a veteran, as a Vietnam veteran, I can tell you right now I'm very partial to the U.S. flag. But this flag, in particular, really makes Washington a little bit better than any place I've ever been. Because when you come from the east, and you see that flag off in the distance, my gosh, that's just like a breath of fresh air. Not only that, but I'm also, thank you, but I'm also a volunteer for the DAV, that's the Disabled American Veterans. Every week, I haul these guys and gals back and forth to JB and John Cochran, and I can tell you right now, we come back into town, and these guys get a tear in their eyes, and they say, wow, look at that. And the guys that I haul are not always from Washington. They're from Sullivan, St. Clair, Eureka, Gray Summit, New Haven, all over the place. And that really means a lot when you see that U.S. flag. So I surely hope that we come up with an answer here. Oh, and by the way, if you put the flag lower than that, that's half-mast, and you can't do that. Okay, thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anna, and I have a question. I don't mean to frustrate, but I have listened to all of this speak of how we're not supposed to ask about the EMF, the RF, the radiation. I don't understand why. It's very close to a school. It's very close to an elderly home. There are a lot of veterans on that side of town. It is important, I think, that their emotions, especially at this time in their life, be respected, especially being post-war. I also think I just don't understand why, even though I understand the FCC regulates the radiation or whatever, I don't understand why the committee or the commission or nobody is allowed to ask about those studies, because while we are disguising these things and making our town pretty, we don't really seem to understand the dangers that are inherent with the radiation risks. With it being so close to a school, I just don't understand why we're not allowed to ask. I did hear him say that these waves go through trees, they go through the earth, they go through other things, and I don't understand why, as a mother, I'm expected to not be concerned or not allowed to ask what potential risk for the children are, because if these waves will go through the earth and trees, they will go through our children's bodies. So I don't know if that's just confusing, or if I'm just the only one confused, or if I just don't understand why we don't have a right, why we would, even on a federal or state level, require that they do these studies and then be told we cannot know.
I don't think we're asking you not to ask.
No,
you don't know.
Right, I know, but
Yeah,
I mean
Lewis,
with.
you gotta ask somebody that's a higher pay grade than me.
Well, who do I ask?
It's because it's state statute. So if you would, correct, Mark? You're right. State statute. So if you disagree with that, which I totally understand, contact your legislators in Jefferson City and tell them that you want that changed so that cities can go back to requiring those studies to be done.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. And I'm all nervous now, so I run out of questions.
But I believe that information, at least some of that information, is available. You would just have to do it through the FCC on a federal level to get the information about what levels were acceptable for each individual location.
Okay, I will do that, because I actually will be very honest, I did not even know this was a disguised poll. I've only, really in the last couple of years been really learning about, the radiation and the issues and the potential and inherent risks that are involved with some of these towers. So, I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well, I wasn't going to be the one to bring it up again. So.
Excuse me, could you state your name,
Yeah,
please?
Don Reekman. I was here last week, that meeting as well. So the U.S. legal limit is 10 watts per square meter, and I guess we were getting, previously, we were allowed to have that information. Where I'm at with this, I understand that the state legislature has passed a law that says that you folks can't ask for those numbers anymore. So my question is, has that been tested in the courts? I suggest you do it anyway. Just write the letter and tell them that we want to know. And let it be tested in the courts. I talked to the FCC today, the technology department. Those guys don't know how to get the numbers. You have no idea how difficult this is. It needs an entity more than this lady who just spoke to make something happen, okay? We have to come together and take a look at what's going on. So, is it Greg Leiter? Craig Leiter. Since these folks perceive that they cannot say anything, how can you personally get those numbers to me?
They can ask, they just can't require.
No, they're not allowed to ask.
Come up.
Can you read the statute again?
You can ask for the information, but if they don't.
Can you tell him how you cannot ask him for the information?
You can ask for the information. If they don't.
Talk about me. I don't.
If
you use a name, because I'm confused when you say you can.
Anybody can ask the FCC for that information. But the FCC will tell you that they don't have, and I'm looking at their website, does not have a comprehensive transmitter-specific database for all of the services it regulates. So whether they have particular information on that particular site, I have no idea. You can ask for it, but we can't impose any sort of regulations on them. If whatever the level is, we tell them, no, you've got to be I'm making up numbers. You got to be 2 below that. We can't do that.
Yes, you can.
We can't.
Yeah.
We cannot.
Yes, you can.
We cannot either under state or federal law. We can't do that.
Yes, you can.
Well, I respectfully disagree.
You can do a environmental impact form that's available on the web. It says, I don't like this. Somebody's got to come take a look at it. And oh, by the way, mysteriously, the enforcement group at the FCC is getting chopped down to where they can't handle the caseload. So yes, something can be done, and it's going to be really difficult. So I go back to you and go, given that maze, how can I get the numbers directly from you?
You can ask me and I'll give you the numbers.
Excellent. Before and after?
But, huh? Well, I can give you before and after. So what happens is that, if you guys are okay with me to explain this. Sure.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Yeah, it's not necessarily the most easiest thing, but essentially every cell site, every year we have to do a study on. It's called an MPE study. Every site we have a spreadsheet that essentially what happens, and I've got the document, it's the government. I mean, it's like 4,000 pages big, but essentially has all the different equations. And essentially what do we have to do a study? And we have to put in how many antennas we have, the height we have, the down tilt, all the information for the cell site. And then it calculates a number of both public and worker. Essentially, those numbers differ because if you work, if you're a contracted worker to work on a tower, you know you're working on a tower that's a radio tower. You know what you're doing. And if you're concerned about it, they have meters that they can wear essentially to make sure. And once again, so different frequencies our bodies absorb and different frequencies they don't absorb. So like 300 megahertz is probably the worst frequency on our bodies than 2.5. Once again, I'm trying to keep it as simple as I can. But all those frequencies, the frequencies that you transmit on, the frequencies that you receive on, all that information gets put into a spreadsheet. And then it tells us, okay, 5% is the limit. So if it's greater than 5%, then we have to do a full-blown survey on. And we normally only do those on rooftops because we never, ever, ever, ever have the problem where we're more than 5%. And that's 5% of the allowable absorption of any particular frequency. So the only time we have to do is on rooftops. And it's really for the workers. Because if the workers are up there working on the roof, working on air conditioning, whatever the case is, and essentially every study we do on a rooftop, we have to place a sign near our antenna that says, stay a foot away. That's our requirements to say, because after you go 1 foot away from the antenna, the signal level is so low at that point, it's not even above the 5%. We're not talking about 105%. We're talking about 5% out of the complete 100. So we have to make sure we provide this to the FCC. They have to, at the sites we got to go do the studies on, the full-blown studies. We got to do the studies. I mean, it's consumes a lot of time for us to be able to keep our license. Because essentially, if we're not regulatory compliant, we lose our license. I lose my job. Sprint loses, everything. So the way the law is written, and you can ask for it, but it can't be any type of requirement on approval or not. And I'm offering it up just in good faith to let you guys know that, yeah, we have to do that. We have to keep track. We have to send it to the FCC where, every month we got to go through a list of sites because we have to do it every year. Does it make sense?
It does make sense. And I think to reiterate, it's the fact that we require a 10-foot fence around something, but we can't require less than 5% radiation on a cell tower.
Correct.
That's what we can't. We can ask any question we want from the FCC. You're saying we can't ask. We can ask. And the guy will give us the numbers. But we cannot enforce something that the FCC cannot guarantee the numbers to us.
And we can't force them to give us the numbers. If
Right.
they give it, we can ask them, and if they give it to us willingly, which Craig is willing to do, then.
And I don't mind telling them individually, but the problem is that as soon as we open this, I don't want to get you guys in trouble. So in other words, if I'm coerced into giving information in a city council meeting, then that could be misconstrued as an arm twisting of, well, if you don't give us the information. And I don't want that to come to that, because then essentially it comes on me, it comes on you. And I'm just saying individually, I don't have a problem with giving the information, because every person, I'd want to know, and I don't have a problem with personally people. And I just told a young lady here, stick around. I'll answer your questions. Because once again, it's good faith. I live in Franklin County. I live around here, and I have kids too. So I'm not trying to be secretive. I just want to make sure that I don't overstep the bounds of the law, because then I become liable as well.
So I'm hearing it is legal for you to...
Come back to the microphone. Don, go to the microphone.
It is legal for you to give those numbers to me.
I can give you the information of what I have, but it can't be used as, certain levels. Like he's saying, you can't say, oh, nah, it's at 2%. We really want it at 1%, so we're not going to give you we're not going to allow you to do it unless it's at 1%. But I can give you personally the information and not infringe upon the law. What I'm saying is that I want to tread very carefully in this arena so that I don't cause an issue for the city as well as for myself.
It's going to make a difference in my vote if he tells me if it's 4 or 5.
Yeah, the city.
It's going to make a difference in my vote if it's 4 or 5. So he can't tell me that number.
The city
That's
can't use it as leverage.
Correct.
You're being
Correct. That's why I wasn't asking.
I am.
Yeah, don't be quoted.
Well, everything's sarcastic right now.
Yeah, I mean, don't be.
So we're going to meet when?
I can meet
Well,
you
you
after
guys
this.
can meet. You all decide that.
Yeah,
You
later.
decide what you want to do.
All right, so now, the one thing that I did want to point out, they did, I think it's Ashley, stated the business plan is to rent out that tower to the limit that the structure will bear, okay? So if you don't maintain this as a flagpole, that thing's going to really look decorated and to the point where they can't decorate it anymore. It's really going to get ugly. Because they're saying right now, 2.5 gigahertz, they could sell it all right now. And so those 3 antennas they're putting up there, that's not going to be near enough. They're probably already looking at the next site, where to put up the next tower when this one is full. So why not let them put up the other tower and keep this one as a flagpole, because that's what the citizens of Washington want.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maggie Brinkman. I live in Brookview. Actually, I live 3 houses down from the flagpole. I can see it from my backyard. So what I want to ask is, okay, in 2004, they agreed to put a cell phone tower there as is disguised, as a flagpole, okay? So now, 2018, 14 years later, when, you know, the citizens of Washington have grown to love the flag as a symbol of Washington, and in these times, a symbol of, you know, the things that are going on. You remember that, you know, you're an American, and it just makes you feel better. You know, in the times of violence and what's going on, shootings and everything else, it just kind of makes you feel good coming into town and seeing that flag. So now, 14 years later, they're going to take back what we originally agreed to and put other antennas on it. I don't think that's acceptable. I agree with compromise. I love the idea of the electrical track. I know that works. I've seen it out in fields. I think it's great. You know, like you said, Susan, I don't think they're thinking outside the box. I think they're coming here and saying, this is what we want and this is all we can do. You know, that's not acceptable. That's not how we run life. You know, it's about a compromise. So we love the flag. You know, I sit in my backyard and I see the flag, you know, and it just is a good feeling. So if it's gone, all I see is this white pole in the back of my yard. You know, that's ugly, you know, and I'm sorry, but it does depreciate my value of my house. Who's going to want to come back there and have a giant white pole in their backyard? Because literally, the pole is actually behind, not my next neighbor and the next neighbor, it's behind his house. I go out there, I can see it, you know. Who wants that? Having a flagpole is great. It's a symbol, you know. So that's my opinion. I think we should keep it and compromise. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. State your name again, please.
Margaret Jett, Maggie. Another question I have for you would be, is this something that's going to be added to later in the future? Will there be, not the pole, but the actual fixtures that you're placing on the pole? Well, are they going to be as the need goes up, as the demand goes higher? Is this something that's going to have to be expanded later in that same area?
In that same area, no. If they had to do another upgrade or something like that, they would have to go on another area of the pole.
Of the same pole?
Of the same pole.
That would be just not a good idea.
But isn't it the case that as the pole is now, with this additional antenna, it would be possible for other carriers to go on there because they can share frequencies, correct? No, they can't? Okay.
Right, no, they cannot.
Okay.
No, the equipment is carrier specific.
Okay.
Because none of us have the same frequencies, because then if we had the same frequencies, it'd be interference and nobody would ever make a phone call. So every frequency is purchased from a carrier.
So it would
Of
have
course,
to be additional equipment?
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's widespread. So, you know, there's no guarantee, right? Nobody can see the future to say, yes, there's going to be something, or no, there's not going to be. I don't have any, we don't have any plans. This is our upgrade.
Right.
You made the
14
statement.
years to get to this point. I can't tell you in 14 years what we're going to do again. It just, I don't know.
You made the statement a while ago, early on in this discussion, something about that this was going to be the last upgrade. What did you mean by that? Because you said, well, this, this is the last. Did you hear that? I mean, this will be the last upgrade. So
This is the last upgrade that we have planned for the cell site. In other words, we don't have anything funded. We don't have anything approved. This is our attempt at getting the site upgraded to where, at the minimum that it needs to be.
So your last upgrade as Sprint.
Correct.
But if you were to sell more space on the tower to AT&T or to another carrier, then,
If structurally available is the key.
so are you saying that structurally this is the last upgrade to it?
I don't know. It had
You
to
don't
be
know.
when the structural analysis is complete. I mean, that's really what it all comes down to, is structural of the pole, and then also the space inside of it. Those are the two things that if you hit the maximum of either one, it's done. Unless you go on the outside, but then once again, you still have to have the structural of the pole, even if you go on the outside. You still have to, be within the requirements of that engineered pole.
But last upgrade was the last one that you as Sprint have planned. But
Correct.
someone else
Yeah.
could.
I think I was
do another
talking about the last one we did back in, that was.
Just a few years ago.
2014, was it, I think?
I don't know. I understood you to
I
say
don't
this
know
is the
exactly
last
specific
upgrade.
day.
Maybe misunderstood.
I take care of thousands of sites, so it's kind of
I
hard to
understand
remember every specific one, so.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah. So will we be back here doing the same thing and, God knows when, you know what I'm saying? So there's got to be some limitations there.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else? Steve?
Steve Underwood. I also live on Burkeview. Many of you know I've had challenges with the flag and that, but I want the flag to stay. To me, the bottom line I see this developing to is, right now we have the pole with the few antenna proposed to being added. If the flag goes away, there's no telling what else. I mean, the city loses any input on what happens in the future. And we already talked about in 14 years, technology changed. Now we need a different set of antenna because of the frequency. What else is going to happen? So what are we going to end up with in 14, 15 more years? When it was proposed, we were told it's going to be, a flagpole. It's going to be aesthetically pleasing. It's just going to be a few antenna. It's not going to be, don't worry about your radiation issues, that kind of thing. And I know, and I appreciate the engineer saying he's going to share those numbers with us. All we have to do is ask. He'll do that. What about the next person? And at what point do we get, and I'm not concerned that there's health issues at this point, maybe down the road, but we're not going to be able to have any say whatsoever without the, so we give this and we give away the farm. That's my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else?
Sean Kestring again. I was just looking today on a website on cell reception, cellreception.com/towers. That's pretty well known. And I was looking at all the cell towers, in Washington, and it shows who owns it and what the addresses are. And the one at 9th and Clay, it says STC5 LLC is the owner and has Sprint in parens. And then there's another one that has the same thing in Union. And I was wondering if these were considered for additional coverage for Sprint.
So you guys heard me talk about the wavelengths and how far it'll cover and how little covers. So essentially, we have towers in Union, we have towers in Washington. You guys already know that. One out west, the one, you know, here and the one we're talking about. They're only going to cover, at best, 7 miles, at best. And essentially, as you have more capacity, so you have coverage and capacity, and they don't always go together. Usually, you know, if you're out on a highway or interstate, you try to get as much coverage as you can, as far as you can, because you're not going to have a lot of users like you will in the heart of Washington. So it's called cell breathing is what it's called. So essentially, as you add more users to a cell site, the actual coverage area of that cell site starts to shrink, because essentially you've got so many people competing for the same RF signal that essentially the coverage it normally would cover actually covers less when you overload the cell site. That's essentially where we're at with this cell site. It's overloaded already. So the performance we're getting off this cell site is much less if we had it in the middle of, let's say, out in a cornfield somewhere out where it's just trying to cover a couple farmers. So we are on several sites all over St. Louis. We have well over 1,000 sites. Sprint does. So, you know, and you need to be able to cover our customers to stay a viable, you know, company.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Any other comments from council? Well, we need to accept this item into the minutes, I assume.
Make a motion.
That would be our next item. Okay, so we have a motion by Sullentrup, seconded by Brinker, to accept this public hearing into the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you accepted the item into the minutes. Thank you.
An ordinance granting a special use permit to permanently remove the flag from a disguised cell tower at 85 Cecilia Drive in the city of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri.
Sullentrup.
Introduced by Councilman Sullentrup. Now, this is the ordinance that's on the agenda tonight that we can vote on, or we vote on whether we want to keep the flag, remove the flag. So the ordinance says that we're allowing them to permanently remove the flag. Right? I have that right? Okay. So any discussion at this point?
If we vote on this and it was voted that we are going to keep the flag, would they have the capability at that point to then be able to ask for that special use permit again after they've thoroughly investigated and they could?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there a time frame on that?
Yeah,
at all?
I believe they'd have to wait 6 months, correct, if it's denied tonight?
Okay.
Yeah.
Would that be an amendment?
No.
We'll just redo
They
it?
just bring it back.
No, they'd have to come back in 6 months.
Okay.
Listen again.
Okay, so the ordinance is stating that we want to permanently remove the flag, and if that fails, then they have to wait 6 months before they can come back.
Okay.
Just so we all know.
And that is on special use permit, Mark, not just rezoning?
Both.
Okay.
I think we should vote on it.
Yeah, I think we should too. I think we should too.
It's already introduced.
It's already been introduced. Okay, so any other questions or comments? We'll have the second reading.
An ordinance granting a special use permit to permanently remove the flag from a disguised cell tower at 85 Cecilia Drive in the city of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri. Patke?
No.
Heidrich?
Nay.
Waterman?
No.
Brinker?
No.
Sullentrup?
No.
Moheski?
Nope.
Holtmeyer?
No.
By your vote, the ordinance did not get approved. The ordinance failed. So,
Can I ask a question?
6 months.
Yes.
If they don't want to put the flag back up, do they have to?
If they don't want to put the flag back up.
Yeah.
The people on the pole.
They have to.
It'd be in violation of the
Yeah,
zoning
it'd be in
ordinance.
violation of the code.
If they take down the flag, it's no longer disguised, they'd be in violation. If they
Correct.
come up with the electric track and it's designed and is able to work, they just have to submit a building permit for that, and they're able to install it.
Okay.
Yes?
Can I seek clarification?
Yeah, come forward.
I just want to make sure I understand, because I was just writing down notes. So if we can figure out a way to keep the flag, then essentially you guys are okay with what, and I'm not asking you to vote. I'm not asking you to draw blood. What's that?
You're talking about the additional antennas.
The additional antenna, so in other words,
It
that
looked
picture
like
right there.
exactly what the picture
You don't
is.
even have to ask for permission from that, you just get a building.
Building permit.
Okay, I just want to make sure, I just want to clarify to make sure. Okay,
And
okay,
there's no time frame on that.
Right.
okay, thank you.
Rezone 3.58 acres of the overlook at Weber Farms from R1A Single Family Residential to R1D Single Family Residential Subdivision.
Thank you all for being here tonight, so, thank you. Mhm. Thanks. You know what, I'm gonna get a drink.
I know.
Okay. So I'm going to run through this. This is kind of, they have three, the applicant has three requests on the agenda tonight. The first is the rezoning. Obviously, it'll have to be voted on separately, but I'm going to have one presentation. So the first was the rezoning, the second is the annexation, and then later I'll finish the presentation on the preliminary plat. So the rezoning is something that's currently in the city limits. The annexation is adjoining that property, and then they're asking for a plat for the property in its entirety. So the first of which is the rezoning. The applicant is requesting the approval of the next phase at the overlook of Weber Farms. So just so for some clarification, this is Weber Heights Drive. This is Rabbit Trail. And so this is the villas at Weber Farm, and this is the overlook at Weber Farm. So it gets a little confusing, but it's two different developers. That's why they have different subdivision names. So I know it's kind of hard to see up here. I think it's better on the screen, but you can see what was platted in the original, the first phase of the overlook of Weber Farms, this extension of Weber Heights Drive. When that was approved, there was a condition of approval on that they had to, one, record a corridor to get this connection made. There was a pipeline that ran between here that was not active, an inactive pipeline. It's since been removed, and this corridor has been recorded, so the connection is still required and able to get two ways in and out of the subdivision, get people from Weber Heights or Washington Heights Drive over to Rabbit Trail. Secondly, we required, I think staff's original recommendation was that they had to connect it, and then they had to provide sidewalks on the streets on both sides, because there are currently sidewalks on Weber Heights Drive. When it was approved, though, that was amended, and they just had to get the corridor instead of actually make a connection, and they only are required to build sidewalks on one side of Weber Heights Drive. They do not need it on these connecting streets. So I just kind of want to give a little background. The first request is a rezoning of 3.58 acres from R1A, single-family residential, to R1D. That is downzoning it from R1A, which is minimum of 10,000 square foot lots, to still single-family with minimum square footage of 7,500 on the lot size. And that is this portion to the northwest here, that there's currently in the city limits. When it was annexed, they requested to bring it in as R1A because they were trying to match the existing subdivision. As there are larger lots in Lake Washington, they went slightly smaller, but still 10,000 square foot on this first phase. And the goal is to transition this subdivision into a denser subdivision that matches what's existing on Rabbit Trail, because it will eventually connect. So we are recommending approval of the first request for the rezoning, for them to rezone this portion of that to a denser residential district, and that way it'll match what's coming in later and what it's connecting to. So I'll stop and take questions on the rezoning portion.
Any questions or comments?
Where are the proposed streets at, Sal?
Well, for
Right, makes the turn and goes down, right?
for phase 2 or for,
Finished phase. I mean, to connection is gonna be over to the right, correct?
yeah, so the connection between the two will be right here. That's not what they're asking for tonight, though.
I understand that,
Yeah,
but I
okay.
mean, so then next, where Staten Drive, is that proposed to connect into the other streets?
No, the only connection, from what we've seen so far, the only connection will be right here. Now, there is a chance that one of these two could still connect to Staten, but we have not seen that plat yet. The only thing we've seen tonight is this area. So there's a chance that these two streets, one of which could connect to Staten. But the only thing we have required of them, so the whole point of the corridor being recorded is that for some reason the current developer gets belly up or decides to back away from the project and someone purchases this project, this land, they would not be permitted to just put a cul-de-sac in here. They would be required to use that corridor and connect that final piece.
Okay. I guess the reason I asked the question is if all these streets here are gonna be cul-de-sacs, then it makes sense that this is the same as this. But if these are gonna, if this is gonna be a cul-de-sac here, and these are gonna be into this development, then you're having 10,000 square foot lots that lead back to 7,500 square foot lots.
I see what you're saying. Yep. We do not know currently how this is going to be connected. We will always every plat they come in, we recommend as much connection as possible. They are not proposing a cul-de-sac on each of these. This will loop around right here, but you're right, it will not loop, as for right now, it will not loop back into this portion.
You need to ask for public comment.
Yes.
Yeah. Does anybody else here have any other questions? Okay, is there anyone in the audience this evening who would like to address the council on this item?
We just kind of wondered which direction he was going to go with that, because I'm.
Come on.
It's later on the agenda.
It's later on the agenda.
Okay, your item is another item, okay.
Oh, okay.
We'll discuss the new street layout later.
Okay.
Yep.
So there
We're
was
on
no other.
3C, we're on 3C right now,
It's just the rezoning.
Just the
the rezoning
Right.
item.
He's going to discuss how to connect it later.
Okay.
Okay, doesn't look like it.
Your Honor, Greg's not here, but were you here in planning and zoning? Was there any objections to this at all?
No, everything went fine in planning and zoning.
Okay, thank you.
Sal, this all was fine in planning and zoning?
Yes, I'm sorry, we approved 9-0. 9-0.
Just to lean on that thing.
Second reading? Okay. Oh, well, let's see. Now we need to accept this public hearing into the minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Patke, seconded by Brinker, to accept this public hearing into the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your votes, you accepted the item. Thank you.
Your Honor, can I ask one? Sal, in the future, when we get the letter from planning and zoning that states it passed, can we get it if it says 9-0 or 5-4?
Yeah, we'll put the vote on there.
Essentially, the last one was 5-4, this one's 9. It makes a big difference when I'm reading.
Right.
I like to take their vote into
We'll make sure we do that.
consideration. Right, thank you.
An ordinance rezoning 3.58 acres of the overlook at Weber Farms from R1A Single Family Residential to R1D Single Family Residential Subdivision in the City of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri.
Holtmeyer.
Introduced by Councilman Holtmeyer. Thank you. Okay, so this is the ordinance that follows the previous item. Any comments or questions? Okay.
An ordinance rezoning 3.58 acres of the overlook at Weber Farms from R1A Single Family Residential to R1D Single Family Residential Subdivision in the City of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri. Patke?
Yes.
Idrich?
Nay.
Waterman?
Yes.
Brinker?
Yes.
Sullentrup?
Yes.
Woheski?
Aye.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
Voluntary annexation 4.19 acres of the Weber Farm.
All right, this does not have to be introduced, correct? Right, it's just a non-ordinance, okay. So this is the next portion of their request tonight. As part of this plat, and including what they've rezoned, they also need to annex a little over 4 acres. So everything in white here is outside the city limits. And then everything in yellow, well, zoning-wise, is already what is in the city limits. So this tract here, 4.19 acres, is what they're planning to annex, or they're proposing to annex in this petition. And then this piece here is what you just voted to rezone. So you can see how they are adjoining. The proposed piece is adjoining to the city limits. It has access via Kensal Drive, and that is Shirley Close. I'm sorry, Shirley Close Drive Road. So it'll have adequate access. They are requesting to bring it in under R1D, which will match the zoning that was just approved, as well as the zoning directly east. I will say, however, when you see the plat later on the agenda, most of the lots are well above 7,500 square feet as proposed. So,
Okay, any questions or comments regarding this?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Sullentrup, seconded by Brinker, to accept this item into the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you accepted the item. Thank you.
and so we have to wait 15 days for anyone to submit opposition on the annexation, and then once that is complete, we will get an ordinance in your next available agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Citizens' comments?
Is there anyone here who would like to address the council on any item that is not on the agenda?
Reported department heads?
Any reported department heads? John?
Ordinances, resolutions. An ordinance authorizing and directing the acceptance of a proposal from Jim Brinker Recycling, Inc., for a Missouri corporation to provide collection and payment on scrap metal.
Sullentrup.
Introduced by Councilman Sullentrup.
Good evening. Hey, this is, had some proposals to put a trailer down at our recycle center to put all our scrap metal in. If you recall, we had a dump truck parked there. We sold the dump truck. We're going to put a trailer in there. We received 3 acceptable proposals based on monthly payout for scrap metal, based on response time for pickup, based on items they would accept or things they would not accept or things they would try to bill us for if they were in the trailer. We did choose Brinker Recycling as our best option. So,
Okay, any questions of Tony? Okay, thanks.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the acceptance of a proposal from Jim Brinker Recycling, Inc., a Missouri corporation, to provide collection and payment on scrap metal. Patke?
Yes.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Waterman?
Yes.
Brinker?
Yes.
Sullentrup?
Yes.
Woheski?
Aye.
Holtzmeyer?
Aye.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, but this contract, is it a 3-year or what is it?
it doesn't have a time frame on it. We can cancel at any time.
Okay.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the City of Washington, Missouri to accept the proposal from Wilson Video Productions for the purchase of audio equipment upgrades.
Patke.
Introduced by Councilman Patke. Robert, you want to tell us about this?
Just to sum up, it is adding 12 new microphones and 2 wireless microphones to the current system.
Did we go out for bid on this at all?
That was going to be my question.
What is wrong with I mean, the microphones are working correctly. What's the problem?
Oh, we're adding them. They're going to have additional microphones, so when we do like admin ops and such, we'll have them at the tables here
They're
for
not these
everyone.
up here.
No.
No.
These
They're-
are fine. These
these
are
are-
staying. This is additional ones for those meetings where we need, before we're past the mic, or the mic would run out of battery. and-
Yeah, it won't be that kind.
How much is it?
$11,000.
Yes.
Same question. Did we go out for bid on this?
I didn't personally go out for bid on it, no. We went with Matt because he's been doing all of the work for the AV system up to this point, and he's really familiar with it.
And have a lot of issues over the years, too.
Isn't that our protocol? We always go out for bid?
Yep.
I could check to see if we've got some additional contractors that would be willing to work on that equipment. And if they would get us something, we'll take it back if you want.
I think it'd be, no offense, but I think it'd be
No.
smart to get a bid for the projects for upgrading this room, since it is right in the limelight of City Hall.
Okay.
Well, I think it's, that's protocol and it should happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't hate to go through the process, but that's what has to happen. I think that's, you know.
Okay, shall we table then the next 3 ordinances? No, the next 2, excuse me.
Can
The
we do
next-
that since it was already read? Oh, okay.
What do we do?
That's up to you. I read it once, it can come back later, or it can die.
Make a motion.
Just, you can bring it back.
Bring it back at another meeting.
So do we table
Postpone
it, or do we have to do something official here?
I would call it tabling it, but I think Mary has a different term. She
What does Mary call it?
Postponing.
There you go.
Postpone.
To another meeting.
Okay, so does someone want to make a motion to postpone
I
these
will
2
make a motion
items?
to postpone.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Patke, seconded by Brinker, to postpone items 6B and C. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Right?
Opposed? By your vote, you postpone those items. Thank you.
An ordinance
you, Robert.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the City of Washington, Missouri to accept the proposal from Wash PC for the purchase of block time for IT department support.
Patke.
Introduced by Councilman Patke. Robert?
Just looking at getting a contract in place for both parties, essentially to keep Wash PC on as our block time for any extra support for the IT department. I went to 2 other vendors. One was lower, but didn't offer the flexibility that Wash PC did, so.
Which is what? What do you mean by flexibility?
We can modify the agreement as needed, essentially. Plus, we have rollover with our hours that none of the other vendors offered. So if I don't use all the hours this month, they do roll over to the next month, and no other vendors offered that. Plus, the other ones were wanting to include emergency call-out time, just if I had to call them outside of business hours. And that's all included in the Wash PC package.
Where does it say about rollovers in that contract?
Wash PC was the only vendor to allow us the ability to roll over unused block time. It's just in the letter from him.
It was in the contract too, from Wash PC.
Was it?
Yes.
Yeah, you look at, well, it's not numbered, it's page 2 of their proposal. It gives you hours and it says that they're non-expiring.
Gotcha.
It's also in that next paragraph. Time not
Okay.
used for a given month will roll over to the next month.
All right.
Any other questions or comments?
An ordinance authorizing and directing the City of Washington, Missouri to accept the proposal from Wash PC for the purchase of block time for IT department support. Patke?
Yes.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Waterman?
Abstain?
Brinker?
Yes.
Sullentrup? Moheski?
Aye.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
An ordinance approving a boundary adjustment for Stonecrest subdivision, Plat 12, in the City of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri.
Introduced by Councilman Brinker.
This is a simple boundary adjustment in the newest plat of Stonecrest. This is Windcrest Drive. You can see even the aerial's old enough, or the lots are new enough that you can't see them in the aerial. But Windcrest Drive is the newest street they've just built, and you can see where the line that was proposed with the house that they're proposing to build on this, the builder that's bought it, they need a little more space, and so they proposed to This lot line hereby removed and bring this line all the way back. This newest part of the subdivision is also R1D. They've started transition into a more dense subdivision, but you can see here, this is 12,000 square feet even once they take the square footage out. So it's well above the minimum. And they show all the same easements they did before. So we have no issue with this. So if you have any questions of me.
Any questions or comments?
An ordinance approving a boundary adjustment for Stonecrest subdivision, Plat 12, in the city of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri. Patke?
Yes.
Heidrich? Waterman?
Yes.
Brinker?
Yes.
Sullentrup? Woheski?
Aye.
Holtmeyer.
Aye.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
An ordinance approving a boundary adjustment for Sunset View subdivision in the city of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri.
Patke.
Introduced by Councilman Patke.
Nope, the one to the right, there you go. All right, this one's a little bit different. So this is Sunset View subdivision off of Clay Street. Sorry, it's not more zoomed out. But this is the original subdivision plat of Clay Street that was done back when we were still, if you remember, even a lot of our lots downtown were 50 by 100. And so these are long, narrow lots that you can see 15, 16, 17, 18 are all owned by are all under one ownership right now, so the county will show it as one lot, but in reality, the original lots are still there. And so this house, when it was built, is built on 2 lots, 15 and 16, and then the 17 and 18 is still available. Under our current zoning code, we wouldn't allow someone to build on these individually. They would have to put them together. And so that's what they've submitted, original lot lines to be removed. So this house will be brought into conformance and put on this 15, 16 will become one lot, and then 17 and 18 will become one lot. This is a mistake here. It says this original lot lines to be removed. They have them on all 3. That has actually already been changed by the surveyor. There was a mistake to put that line there. So he's already submitted that, and what will be recorded will just be removing these 2 lots. And so we'll have a lot essentially that'll look like this. One here at the existing house, one with the proposed, and they are submitting, they have plans to submit a new building permit on this lot.
How wide were the old lot lines?
50 feet. So now they'll be 100 by, I guess this was 50 by 200, it probably says on here.
142.
142, there you go. So now they'll be 50 by 142. So,
100 by 100.
sorry, I'm sorry, 100 by 142. It's been a long night already. Yeah. Still got 3 more.
Okay, any questions or comments beyond what we've already asked?
An ordinance approving a boundary adjustment for Sunset View subdivision in the city of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri. Patke?
Yes.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Waterman?
Yes.
Brinker?
Yes.
Sullentrup?
Yes.
Woheski?
Aye.
Heidrich? I'm sorry, Holtmeyer.
Yeah.
You get to vote again.
A little hydro on the brain.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank
Commission, committee, and board reports. Preliminary plat, the overlook at Weber Farms, Plat 3.
Yep, that's the one. Thanks. Okay, so this is the final request that goes along with the 3-parter, with the annexation and the rezoning. So here's the plat that's submitted. It is a connecting street, but they do have it terminating. So Shirley Close will terminate in a cul-de-sac that meets our new minimum requirement. It's 96 foot wide, or 96 feet in diameter. And then they have Kensal Drive that will terminate into Shirley Close. So they will both, points of ingress and egress will be on 2 Ever Heights Drive, and they will not have connection to Rabbit Trail yet. But again, like I said, with that corridor, once that's built, hopefully in the next phase, that they will be required, or that they'll have 2 ways in and out of the subdivision meeting fire code. They show all the appropriate easements for utilities. Stormwater has been submitted to the engineering department as being handled off-site. They developed a stormwater retention basin that handles the entire subdivision. It's just not part of this plat. and they do have that noted on here. And then the last thing, we do have a condition of approval on there that they have to note on the final plat that they're receiving approval for a street grade above 10% and a max of 12. If you remember, there was a variance that was done on these two streets to get them up from a max of that was previously 10 up to 12. They wanted it for the subdivision in entirety, but we told them we can only approve what has been submitted on the plat, and so they're continuing to, they're requesting to carry that variance onto each section of this plat. I don't have it on here, but they have already submitted construction plans. We actually don't typically require that much information with the plat, but they did submit it all at the same time, and the construction plans did show the existing grade to be over 12, so they are bringing it back down. So they are at least making the situation better than it is currently. They're just not getting it down to the 10%. Considering what they have already constructed out there, it was granted a variance and it meets the 12%, and it's similar to what you see throughout town, especially on this side of town. Once you get south of 100, we had no issue of recommended approval with the plat with continuing that variance. As you can see here, they do show some, they have an outlet, the stormwater to be discharged here. This is an undeveloped piece of property that is owned by the developer. They have the easements that go across anyway, and so I'm sure once they develop this portion and Staten Drive is connected, this will be, changed up with the future plat, but it won't affect the plat of the individual lots as they're sold off. So all language as required has been shown, and we are recommending approval. And so just to kind of zoom out again so you can see where we're at. Here's Rabbit Trail, this is Weber Heights. So Shirley Close is coming down with cul-de-sac here, and Kensal Drive is coming and connecting here. So that's the next phase what we're looking at. Fortunately, I don't have that superimposed on an aerial. I wasn't able to do that with they just gave us PDF, so.
Okay, any questions or comments?
Make a motion, accept it in minutes.
And then there is.
Tom, did you have something?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I want to know if the complaint department's open for just a minute.
It's always open.
Okay. For the record, my name is Tom Fenner. I own Lot 17 of Weber Estates Plat 1. Would you mark there? That's the one I own, with a street address of 2117 Kensal Drive. In developing this building on this lot, we have built a 4-bedroom home there. We were required to put in a sidewalk. Directly across the street, our two homes have been built in Lot 30 and 31. I think you could mark those, show them where they are. Right across the street, you can see there's one of them. And that is of the overlook at Weber Farms with no sidewalk required. To the south of my Lot 17 is Lot 38. In the preliminary plat 3 of the overlook at Weber Farms with no sidewalk required. No sidewalks are required on any of the 25 lots that you are asking to be approved tonight. To the north of my Lot 17, which you can't see on there, but it's to there, is Lot 16 of Weber Estates Plat 1, which, if it's ever built on, will be required to have sidewalks on both Kensal Drive and Weber Heights Drive. So in the interim, right now, I have built a sidewalk to nowhere. I've always felt the responsibility of any elected official in considering any issue brought before them was what is the effect of this action on the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens we serve. That was my guidepost during my service as county commissioner here in Franklin County. My concern is that evidently you, the elected City of Washington officials, both now and in the past, feel that the citizens you serve are safer and healthier walking on streets rather than walking on sidewalks. My hope is that sometime the city and its codes would require any developer to have at least sidewalks on one side of all streets being developed. It works, folks. I have seen it work many times. I ask you to give that consideration. Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Do we have any comment on that?
The only thing I think our code now reflects on just major, is that
Yeah,
correct?
so we, just, when we did the code amendment, we put in the first draft, sidewalks on every street. And then it got cut back through negotiations in public forums down to sidewalks on one side of major streets as determined by the master plan. And unfortunately, nothing in this subdivision is a major street in the master plan. When Weber Heights was approved, every street, whether it was Weber Heights or connecting street, had to have sidewalks on both sides, as the builders had to do it as the homes were built. We recommended that same requirement on the first phase of Weber Heights, and it was removed.
Was that a subdivision code, or was that?
That was
city-
That was completely on the builder at the
Or was that an
time.
ordinance?
That was, they submitted that, they
Voluntarily.
They voluntarily to do that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they voluntarily offered to go ahead and provide sidewalks in their
The
development.
developer
Yes, on the
of
first
that
phase of Weber
community.
Heights, they offered to do that. We requested that the new developer continue that, and it was contested and removed. I can't remember if that P and Z or at council level, but that's why it has not been continued. So, yeah, unfortunately, we would love to, I mean, from a staff's point of view, from a city planning point of view, I would love to require this next phase, to keep pushing to have sidewalks, but we would just then be having sidewalks, no sidewalks, sidewalks, no sidewalks. So now when we have these connecting subdivisions, we're going to have situations like where Mr. Fenner is describing, but if we required sidewalks on phase 3, then we'd still have all these streets with sidewalks to nowhere. So
I would also add that the original developer of Weber Estates, it was specified per the plat, specifically a width of the sidewalk, other design components of that. As you all know well, over time, ADA plans transition, you get wider sidewalks, the requirements become stricter. It is posing a little bit of a conundrum for, because we have a plat issue, and then we also have an ADA concern as well. Mm-hmm. So we're working through that, but just so you know, by specifying it on the plat and not in city code makes a difficult a situation for the actual construction of those sidewalks. In addition, we also were able to put some verbiage within city code to grade the right-of-way to street grade. We are working diligently to enforce that code. Obviously, that's a new code. We're trying the best we can to keep up with that. The issue that I've seen is that since there's so much rock in these locations, what the builders do is they elevate the house. So they get the house up out of the rock. That creates a steep driveway, which creates an issue to where they're grading all the way down to the back of curb. So when we would come in potentially and put, city dollars up to put a sidewalk in the future, I have no way to do that because I can't physically, with the grade transition, you cannot make it happen. So we're chasing it as staff.
well, we've required this subdivision to be graded to right-of-way.
Correct.
Right. So
I
at
just
least
would
in the
add
future-
some other design components to that.
Right.
A code situation would, fix a lot of those issues.
I would personally want to have that in our code, have sidewalks required on all, it seems like forward thinking and would be a good idea.
It's been discussed in the past over and over and over again.
And that was part of the discussion with the extension of High Street, wasn't it? And that was
Very
when we
much.
just, when it went to one side?
Yeah, they will have it on one side as it continues further south.
As it continues from the current position south.
So we are
you don't
going to
have
continue to have
sidewalks
sidewalks that are not connecting, but at least we can, I mean, I think it's a start to have them be constructed, and we can put them in later if we want.
Yeah, I mean, High Street, I mean, to the 1,200 foot to where it dead ends now, there's no sidewalks proposed unless the city wanted to front the dollars to do that.
But beyond that,
Beyond that, it's required.
it's required.
Your code now requires it.
Okay. That,
See, that's-
this part was done pre-code.
Well, yes, this portion that we're talking about with Weber, yeah, that was a time, it's the same as in Windy Hills where they have a sidewalk. That was not required at that time either.
The developer decided to do it.
Right.
So like, I agree with Mr. Fenner. I think it's good, and we're trying to make it requirement, but because of those who sat before us, we're piecing together still at this point. Correct, John? I mean,
That's correct. We're doing everything we can to
Right.
keep up with it, but yeah, it is a
Required.
piecemeal action. I mean, I've seen it both ways, to where the developer puts the street in, puts the sidewalk in, and moves forward, and then they essentially would put up a bond for that sidewalk, because what happens is when you're backing up concrete trucks over a sidewalk, you're breaking them up as you're building the home. So I've also seen it to where you build the sidewalks as you move forward, when the lots develop, which would alleviate his, Mr. Fenner's concern, because you will have sidewalks to nowhere, because they're not in up front. So I've seen it both ways. There are pros and cons, but I mean, just like anything else, there's a solution to them. If you break up a public sidewalk dedicated to the public, it's your responsibility to fix, as the builder. So there's ways around it. It's just, we haven't gotten there. So.
Did we finish this?
Accept and approve.
Make
Okay,
a motion, accept it.
We need to accept this into the minutes. Okay, we have a motion by Solentrub, seconded by Brinker, to accept this item into the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you accepted the item. Thank you.
Preliminary plat, 111 West Main Street.
Yep, that one, thank you. This is it's not a boundary adjustment, it is a subdivision, because currently, today, this is John G's Tap Room and the Beer Deck, currently considered one lot here. You can see it's highlighted in blue. They are wanting to separate that into two different lots, one for the Beer Deck, one for the tap room and parking lot. This is just to show the zoning. It's all C3, which allows for a 0 lot line, and we have no minimum lot sizes. So with their subdivision, they're not creating any non-conforming situations with their existing buildings. So here is the plat that was submitted. I highlighted the Lot A and Lot B in red because there was a lot going on there with the age of those parcels and that block. There have been a lot of easements recorded over the years. You can see there is an old utility easement here, and then there's cross-access marked out that gets you from, this is the gravel lot where the buildings collapsed. There's an ingress-egress access there that gets from this lot over to this neighboring property. They have marked ingress-egress between Lot A and Lot B here, and then also pedestrian ingress-egress lot into Lot B here as well. So they've continued the access. They're not creating a non-conforming situation with parking either, because in C3 we don't require them to have on-site parking. So the Beer Deck is permitted to utilize, the off-street parking as well as John G's parking here. If they were to sell in the future, they could come up with their own agreement on parking. Again, since it's C3, we don't have any requirements for them to submit that. It's all, everyone's allowed to use public parking.
Did they discuss, Sal, whether or not they wanted to go ahead and provide a cross easement for parking on the other lot if they needed it? I mean, did they even mention it?
Onto Lot B or onto this neighboring lot here?
No, I was going from like what's in front of John G's down here where people park.
Behind Drogies?
Yeah,
On the
behind
side of
Drogies where the bocce ball court is, I guess.
Well, I mean, this is what there's cross-access.
That is the cross-access easement for parking.
Yep, this is cross-access easement, and as well, so is this.
Okay.
So it allows vehicle access if they wanted to follow this, but in reality, look at the aerial, I mean, it's all open. But that would be right here, and then right here. They have two cross-access points.
Okay, that's fine.
Can we use that old utility easement for potential to?
Yeah, we discussed that. It's not dedicated to the public, but that's not a concern of ours at this time, because if we as we continue to bury utilities, they would be along Front Street in this location. At least preliminary design shows that we would then, because right now we're burying along this new alleyway, we would actually come down and the rest would be along Front Street because there's less to deal with there. Now, if it came to an Ameren and we came up with a plan that they wanted to go through an alleyway, we could work with there is a partial alley here that goes to this point. You can, you can kind of see it right here.
Yeah.
And then we could work with the property owners to get an easement, but at this time with our plan to go on Front Street, there's no way, there's really wasn't a reason to ask for a dedication to the public. Sorry.
Real quick, you kept bringing up that parking lot with the gravel parking. Are we required to have asphalt parking around downtown?
We are.
Not in downtown though, right?
No,
Or are we?
that was a change in the 2017 code.
Okay.
But that would be considered grandfathered. That's been there prior to March 2017.
Is that considered a parking lot where them cars are parked?
I guess I mean, we don't have a definition for a parking lot. We have, I mean, if you're developing anything new, even if it's downtown, you have to have hard surface. That was in C3, that was a new rule as of March 1st, 2017, and that has been there prior to. So it's grandfathered in. But if they were to, build on the front of it and wanted to still have cross access for parking in the back, they would have to improve that surface in the rear and bring it into compliance.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we want to accept this into the minutes? And we have a motion by Solentrup, seconded by Brinker, to accept this item into the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you accepted the item. Thank you.
An ordinance approving the final plat of the condominium of the Missouri River Building in the city of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri.
Introduced by Councilman Brinker. This is the ordinance that follows the previous item. Any questions or comments? Okay.
An ordinance approving the final plat of the condominium of the Missouri River Building in the city of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri. Patchkey?
Yes.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Waterman?
Yes.
Brinker?
Yes.
Solentrup? Moheski?
Aye.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
Mayor's report?
I just want to bring you up to speed a little bit on our capital improvement sales tax. The committee is now working on the marketing aspect of this, of the campaign. And thanks to Bill Homick, we came up with a catchy little phrase to go with it. And our tagline is local funds, local control, local success. And so they've put together a PowerPoint presentation, still needs to have some tweaking done, but starting Thursday morning, they are going to hit the road with their show and start visiting different service organizations and things like that. So the chamber is the first stop on Thursday morning. Right now, they have about 15 or 16 places that we're trying to schedule to go and speak. Our crew that's going out is Kurt Voss, Chris Eckelkamp, Gretchen Pettit, and then Darren and me will be going as well. So anyway, it's looking real good. So the campaign is, we also are working out on a quad fold brochure that we will be mailing.
Chamber's going to be mailing.
The chamber will mail that because we have formed a committee now for our funding. And then we will put something in the utility bill here in the city. And then just prior to the election, we'll be sending a postcard out to all the registered voters. So anyway, we're going to use that tagline quite a bit. And then we also are going to be doing some signs and yard signs as well and some advertising. So we also have several dates scheduled to be on the radio. So we're hitting it full force these days. So.
And just for clarification, what goes out with the utility bill is an informational brochure. It will not have anything indicating vote yea or nay.
So And that's really all I have. I wanted to bring you up to speed. If you have any questions, we're continuing to meet weekly.
Correct.
The committee continues to meet weekly, and we're meeting down at the chamber office now at 1 o'clock on
The next
Tuesdays.
one actually will be at 10 o'clock next Tuesday because
Oh.
of some conflicts.
Okay, 10 o'clock next Tuesday. Okay.
City Administrators Report.
No report, but I do have a couple items for executive session.
Council comments.
I think you just heard them.
That's right.
City Attorney's Report. Public vote on whether or not to hold a closed meeting to discuss personnel, legal, and real estate matters pursuant to Section 610.021 RSMO 2000. Patke?
Yes.
Idrich? Waterman?
Yes.
Brinker?
No.
Sullentrup?
No.
Moheski?
No.
Holtmeyer?
Yay.
You guys are fooling. Okay, executive session. It shouldn't take long.
Wait a minute.
It failed.
It did not pass.
Can you do it again, because I have to have an answer.
Well, aren't you
really-
guys
yeah,
horsing
I-
around? You guys are horsing around, come on.
All right.
We'll do
I
it.
changed my vote.
Yeah, I changed mine.
Okay. We're having an executive session, you know it. Okay,
I forgot
come on.
that Greg wasn't here. I just want to make you make the decision.
Okay, we're going to have it, so. I know what it's about, and we need to do it, okay? So anyway.
Oh, good one.
Quit horsing around, so anyway.